All right, we're live.
Yeehaw.
Welcome to the Atheist Republic Hangout. I'm Makisha. We have Aiden, Army, Narav, Sarisha, and Travis with us here today so far. We might have some people trickling in as we go along. Today we're going to be talking about paganism, and we'll get into a little bit of how we're defining that and what we mean when we're talking about it. But for right now, I just want to let you know that we have at least one person, Aiden, who has a lot of experience with paganism and is going to be the person we're going to be talking to the most about his personal experience today. And of course, anybody else who has their own experiences will be chiming in, and we'll be asking a lot of questions as we go. So hopefully it'll be a good time. Aiden, why don't you start out by letting us know first of all, where are you from?
I didn't understand that last bit.
Where are you from? Where do you live?
Northeastern U.S., Ohio.
And is that the part of the world that you've been in for most of your life? Are you a Midwest guy, or?
Pretty much Ohio for all of my life. I've traveled a little bit to different areas of the U.S., and I did have 2.5 weeks that I spent in Western Europe. Did Britain and a couple other countries up there, but for the most part, I'm an Ohio guy.
And what do you do in Ohio for a living, your work?
I'm an IT specialist. I deal with mainly larger scale network connections, that kind of work. The whole social networking aspect has been a lesson of necessity when getting involved with Atheist Republic, and you, Makisha, have been a huge help in several different facets of that. So that's for you there.
For those of you who don't know or who are watching, Aiden does, well, probably any of the memes you've seen, the images, quote images you've seen over the past quite a while now have come from Aiden. We have a couple of other designers, but Aiden cranked them out there for a long time and keeps pumping them out to us and does a great job. So Aiden and I work together quite a bit because I work a lot with the designers. So not just a technical guy, creative designer guy as well. And we thank him for all of his hard work for that. Okay, so Aiden, why don't you start off by helping us out a little bit? How would you personally define paganism in the context of this kind of conversation?
Okay, first off, the whole concept of paganism, for people to call that, is a very personal idea. If you are a Catholic or if you are Jewish, your views, beliefs, and worldview is kind of consistent from one person to the next. With pagans, it's quite a bit different, depending on the traditions that you follow, depending on your belief structure, depending on a lot of different factors. It's a very unique, very personal belief path. For this, and for how I live my paganism, it sort of falls in with the other aspects of my life, which is I do music and I do storytelling. And in both cases, if you want to teach a lesson, if you want to teach somebody something, if you can tell them a story, that's why we tell anecdotes to each other. We share, there's some context that lesson is contained in. You could tell people the whole idea that, if you can't get it, you're going to think it's not worth anything. Or you could tell them the story of the fox and the grapes. Similar type of teaching, similar type of message there. For me, the idea of getting along with each other and interacting with each other, my paganism sort of comes very close to humanism, and with a lot of the stuff that Makisha has written, and just sort of things that she has written, and I've sort of gone off on tangents, because I'm really good at tangents. If I tangentize, please poke me or something. But there's a lot of parallels there. It is about finding your place in the world. It is about recognizing that other people are an important part of making your life better, and you are an important part of making other people's lives better. And I think that's kind of humanism, isn't it, basically, more or less?
Yeah, more or
understanding that we're
less. So how did you come by this path? How did you get started in pagans? Because you're a priest, is that what?
yes,
Okay,
I
so
am.
you're a priest within paganism. So how did you come by? How did your journey lead you this way?
I was brought up Catholic, and I was an altar boy from the age of about 10 till I was about 19 or 20. I was the senior altar boy for a good 3 or 4 years. It came with some perks as far as being able to schedule the other guys, and you had power, so you had to have some fun with it. But being a participant in the Catholic rite was kind of a neat thing, as opposed to standing in the pews or sitting in the pews or kneeling in the pews, which you did all of these things. But in my early 20s, I got away from believing in anything, really. The whole cognitive dissonance piece of this doesn't make sense, and if this one true God's follower is trying to kill this one true God's follower, this stuff just didn't make sense to me. Uh, when I had been out for a while, I was busking on street corners, playing guitar on street corners, and that's where I started to see a sort of connection and how important music was. And I followed that path for a bit. And the stories that are the bardic stories that are the more, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, but being able to get people to come together over a common thing. And stories and music is one way. And a natural extension of that is having mythology, a shared mythology, which is really what religion is. It's just that I recognize the myths that are part of my path as being just that, as being mythology. I don't think that there is some great god Zeus out there running around. However, I have seen some all-powerful men brought to their knees and destroyed because, they decided that this chick over here was kind of cute, and they got caught, which is really a lot of what Zeus's problems were. So there's a lot of common pieces between our myths and being our human selves. And we share those aspects. There's different models that are used, and mine is more along the lines of what's called archetypes. In each of us, there's a warrior. Some people, that's the face they wear all the time. In each of us, there's a nurturer. And again, some people wear that face all the time. And recognizing that we all have those pieces, if something needs done, and you have a way to light up that warrior in the group that you're in, because that is the face that you need, then you gain something. The same thing with nurturing. The whole thing of when a family pulls together because of a loss, that if you can pull up that nurturer that is in every single person, the whole group benefits. And part of this is guided in some ways by myth. One of the things that we had history-wise is literacy is something that is relatively new. So you didn't have a lot of people that couldn't read and write. And it's kind of difficult to remember a list of facts or a list of concepts. However, if you had a story that was shared in a group, even if nobody read, you could say 2 words, fox and the grapes, as I had indicated, as I had given an example earlier. And that communicates an entire concept, an entire idea. The bards of old would carry an encyclopedic knowledge of the law, and it was in the form of verse. Because if you've ever done anything that involves music or poetry, when you're going through that, one line calls the next line in your memory. If I gave you a page of text to memorize and then repeat back to me, you'd have a difficult time with it. If I gave you a song 4 pages long and you learned it, you would have no trouble pulling it up. And all I'd need to say were the first 2 or 3 words. That's how a lot of this, that's my part of the pagan group that I'm in.
So it sounds like you were drawn to the story, the oral passing along of wisdom and direction and the communal component. Do you feel like you were also, did you miss the rituals of the Catholic Church? Were you drawn to kind of the rituals of paganism? Because because of your experience, do you think, within Catholicism? And because some people tend to go sort of one.
Okay, I think I caught most of that. Here's what I've got. When I was in the church, being part of what was going on helped me hold my interest. One of the things that I have is I have a very difficult time being a bystander in anything that I'm involved in. I am not really a good member as far as your rank and file. I lose interest. If I'm actively involved, I don't do well with social gatherings that don't have a structure. You know, oh, we're having a party tonight. Why don't you come by? I don't really fit in that well. But if there's some kind of a structure, if there's a group that has a purpose, I have a little bit more to work with as far as the, you know, here's why we're here. Purpose, yes, okay, good. And the gatherings that we have, as far as, I mean, I am in the leadership of that of the local group here, and part of that does give you, I mean, there is, we joke about the whole thing of, you know, what's the use of having power if you don't abuse it every now and then, just a little. But there is a sense of purpose, and one of the things that is often brought up is, you know, if you're atheist, what's the meaning of life, or what, you know, why are we here? And really, at any of the events that I do, or any of the gatherings that we have, I know what that meaning is. I help people, we all help each other, and I help facilitate that. There isn't really a meaning other than what you create.
Armin has a question, I believe.
Yeah, so you said you personally don't believe in the stories.
I didn't hear you.
Yeah. So I want to know if most people that call themselves pagans, do you think most of them believe in the stories behind paganism, or they all understand that these are just stories that they're learning lessons from? And if paganism is just like a bunch of stories that people are just learning lessons from, how is that different from other stories that just have a moral message within them? You know, is it the community around those stories that makes them paganism relative to, because other people write stories and books that has a moral lesson as well, but we don't consider those paganism. And how is, again, and this idea that paganism is just some stories with some moral values, some people also claim that about Islam and Christianity. So how is that, but people take those to be, you know, religions. So is paganism similar in that way, or is it not a religion as it is today? It used to be a religion, and now it's just more of a way of people building communities. So how is it different in that sense?
Wow, there's a lot of questions there. That one's kind of thick. Let me just go off on a very small tangent that might help explain this. We just had the Super Bowl here in the United States. And one of the things, if you looked around, you would see people with flags from whatever team that they were supporting flying on their car. They'd wear their team jerseys. I mean, some of these people, they're painting their faces. I saw someone that actually had a Steelers tattoo on them. That I don't understand as far as tattooing, but that's neither here nor there. The idea is that you're how firmly do you or how deeply do you dig yourself into that particular aspect of your culture? These people are living it. When we do ritual, I've got robes that I wear, I've got a blade that I carry. When these people go to a football game, they wear their jerseys, they bring their towels. Like, that's a big thing with Pittsburgh, I think. They bring, no, Pittsburgh wasn't in this one, was it? Or was it? I don't know. Not in this one. See, I don't follow sports. Not my path. But the idea is how much of yourself are you putting into that society that you're living in, or that social group. Our group, you know, we suspend to varying degrees. We suspend disbelief. We allow ourselves to go to our campouts. We dance around the fires. Yes, we dance naked around the bonfire in the middle of the night. Some people shouldn't do that. But it is allowing yourself to just get away for a little while. And it is a wonderful shared experience. Some of the differences, you were saying, you know, what's the difference? You're looking at you have the Christians and you have the Islamic that are saying that they're following their faith. We're not killing each other. I'm not going into an abortion clinic and blowing it up. I am not, you know, I am not doing some of the other horrific things that are done in the name of deity. My goal really is, outside of anybody's particular faith or belief, is let's make this world a better place, even if it's just the very small piece that we live in. I think it's Neil deGrasse Tyson who said he has 2 goals every day and to accomplish every day, and one of those is he wants to learn something new, and the other one is he wants to make the world a little bit better for somebody or several somebodies. That's kind of where I'm at. And a lot of the pagans that I hang around with have a similar view. And it is not anything that is trying to say that. I think one of the key parts in paganism is this, is that there's the idea that there's many paths to the center. Thus, someone else's belief is not a threat to mine. And that is something that is huge. That is something I think that sets paganism and the pagan mindset and the pagan lifestyle very separate from the monotheistic faiths. The mere existence of someone else claiming that I believe in Allah and Islam is the one true way is a huge threat to the Catholics, because Catholics, they believe their way is the only one way. And that means that you're telling me that my way is wrong. No, I'm not saying your way is wrong. I'm just saying your way is yours. And that gets rid of a lot of the conflict that happens.
Sarisha has a question or comment that she wanted to tag on to Armin, and then I would like to talk to Travis a bit, who considers himself, I believe, an ex-pagan, so that'll be, we can get some of that perspective as well. So Sarisha, go ahead.
Yeah, so Aiden, do you follow any religious texts that is a very common feature in other religions? So do pagan religions have any specific texts that they derive their messages from, any doctrines? Secondly, I would like to ask you about the rituals. Do you follow certain rituals? Because there are certain groups I'm sorry for the background noise. There are certain groups in India that are nature worshippers. So paganism is essentially related to nature worship in these parts of the world. So what is it that defines paganism? Because there is a certain definition for other religions also.
Okay, the technical definition of paganism is that the word pagan comes from the Latin word paganos, which meant country dweller. When the new religions came in, I'm going off on a tiny bit of a tangent, but I think this does fit. When the new faiths came in, they were coming into the cities, because if you're trying to sell something, or if you want to put an idea, you want to go where all the people are. And pagan became a derogatory term, because the people in the cities, you know, here are these new ideas that we're all sharing, and those ignorant country dwellers, the pagans, paganos, they don't know anything. They're just connected to the land and they're farmers. Heathen is a similar thing. Heathen is based on dweller on the heath. It's similar meaning, different region as far as the origin of the word. As far as your question regarding sacred texts, there aren't any like passed down through the ages texts that we use. We do use the old stories. And there's different variations on the different myths. I mean, depending on what part of the, especially Europe you go to, they're going to have different opinions on the different old gods. And there's different pantheons. There's Kyrinos, who is very similar to another character named Hern, which comes from, Hern is actually very smaller as far as region-wise. But it's the mythologies that are the closest thing, I guess you could say, to the sacred texts. And the mythologies were a scaffold, kind of the same way that the Christian and Islamic sacred texts are, on which to build a moral on which to build a morality. You know, basically be good. Well, with the Abrahamic, the monotheistic Abrahamic faith, a lot of it is be good or you're going to hell. The pagan advantage, I don't know, or the pagan difference, I think, is there's an understanding that you be good to each other because I want to live in a world where people are good to each other. And the difference is subtle, but there's an understanding that you have control over it. If I go out and I cause problems, and I'm a mean, vicious person, I'm going to live in a world where I have to deal with mean, vicious people. So there's an idea of what you put out there comes back. And different variations of paganism have like the threefold return. You know, you put good out there, it'll come back 3 times. You put bad out there, that's just different faces on the same myths, different faces on the same thing. There's just core understandings of how this world works, and that you want to be what you want that world to be. Gandhi had a few things like that were along that line. I think, does that cover the first part of your question, the part as far as the sacred texts issue, or the sacred text question? The other piece is that there's constantly new stories being written. Now, they're on older themes, and they cover older lessons, if you will, but they're more modern interpretations of it that people have an easier time identifying with. I've written songs and I've written stories both ways that take the old concepts and they put them into a new setting that way people have an easier time identifying with them. That's on the sacred text part. Now, what was the second half? Because you had 2 pieces that you were doing.
So she was asking about the texts or doctrines, and then any
rituals,
and also how is it related to nature worship?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Makisha.
One of the things as far as the nature worship is, again, I think one of the words that goes with many of the people I hang out with is mindfulness. And that is something that is part of, I believe, a big part of the Hindu and Eastern faiths, is being aware of the totalitarian of what you're doing. There's not really a worship. There's a reverence. Those are different words. Worship is saying, "Oh, earth, I sing songs to you," so on and so forth. Revere is I value it and I recognize its importance in my life. There is a separation. We look in, especially in the U.S., and I am somewhat limited on my other world views, but I'm very understanding of what it is here in the U.S. You have people that are in high positions of government that claim to be Christians, and part of Christianity is stewardship of this earth, stewardship of this world, taking care of it. And you have them backing programs and putting money into things that are definitely not good for this planet. They are very good for profit, but they're not good for this planet. Part of being pagan for me is being aware of my impact on the world around me, the impact of the world on me. You know, if you're living in a place that has, we're fortunate here in the U.S., amongst other things. We do have freedom of speech. And a lot of the stuff I've read on AR that has to do with some of these people that are hiding, they can't let this be known. That would be something that I can't imagine living under that kind of stricture, where this is how I feel, but I have to keep my mouth shut about it. So I do value that part of the U.S. It is a mixed bag. But as far as ritual, I'm going to go back to the football thing again. People get together for a game, and people bring food. And some people make sure that, you go to the person that has the big screen TV because that's the best place to watch it. They have the best venue for this. And everybody wears their jerseys. Some people said, some of these wackos, they paint their faces. Here's my team colors and all that. But they get together to share that experience, that common thing that they enjoy. In our rituals, there are a lot of, the ones that I lead, there is a theme, there is an intent. There are 8 main holidays that are spaced through the course of the year. Christianity has got mainly Christmas, Easter, there's been a couple other minor holidays, but they're excuses for people to get together and have a good time. You know, this one we're going to exchange gifts. This one we're going to have a big bonfire. There's one we do in the fall where we build something called the Wicker Man. And every year, because guys are guys, the guys are the ones in charge of building it. Every year we challenge ourselves to make it bigger. It's now almost 8 feet as far as the height of this thing. And then this is burned. But it's an opportunity to get together, have a shared purpose to be there, eat food, enjoy music. That's a lot of it, to be part of a community. And a lot of the people that come to our group are what pagans. I did a presentation on this once when I was going to college. It was a world religions class, and they had never had a pagan before. And pagans, from my experience, and let me get through the whole list before anybody has any reaction. The first thing I say is pagans tend to be a higher intelligence level and better read than most of your other religious adherents. They also tend to have a higher, much higher percentage of people who have some sort of mental illness. I deal with depression, and I also deal with a sort of a bipolar almost thing at times. It is controlled, it is managed and all that, but a lot of the people that are pagans don't fit in with your common societies. They don't fit in with your common groups because they're weird. We're weird. We talk about things, we have really strange interests. But what happens is when you gather a group of people together that have a shared interest, that common denominator goes away and you're just a normal person. The guy that I saw up at Walmart the one time wearing had the face paint on and he had the sports jersey on and he's hooping. I think he'd already been into his beer for a little bit, but that he was hooping it up. He's a weirdo to me. But you know what? When you get 10 or 15 of these people together in a living room, they're all a bunch of normal people watching a football game. That's the same thing it is with pagans. Does that help?
So, yeah, that was good information. Thanks, Aiden. Narav has a question, and then I want to move on to a couple other people who have personal experiences with paganism. Narav?
Yeah, thanks. I have a question based on an example. During World War II period, the SS was documented as trying to recreate the old Germanic religion on the basis of the Nazi ideals. And although they didn't, I mean, Hitler rejected it, but they still Himmler went quite a bit a distance to try and recreate the occult and various elements of that. Now, with what you say, as it basically gives me an impression that as a group you can redefine the term paganism according to your needs and what you want. My question is, what will be the relevance of paganism today? Because when I first read about it, it felt like it was just a kind of a reaction against Abrahamic religions and monotheism. And so a lot of people were trying to go back to what their original faith was. And then when you put it like this, when you look at some of these other aberrant examples, I want to ask you, what will be the relevance in coming years of something like paganism? What will we hear about, and what's it going to do?
So I'm gonna ask that Aiden briefly address that question in any way that he can, and then Travis, I'd like you to chime in with whatever response you have specifically regarding the World War II component of that. So Aiden, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself. I don't know if you muted yourself or. Okay, there you go. Oh, nope. You're muted again.
I don't know why I'm keeping you.
No, okay, there you go. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. Are we working now?
Yeah.
All right. One of the things that is a big difference between any of the pagans that I've met and any of the dominant faiths is that the pagan faiths tend to encourage you being an individual. You don't have to follow, oh, you didn't go to Christmas or you didn't go to church on Christmas, oh, you're a horrible person. Paganism encourages free thought. It also encourages you to research, and whatever area you're working with. I've got a decent background in the bards, the storytelling traditions. It encourages individuality and values that individuality. And going forward, I think that what is in human history, having a group thought and a group think was beneficial. When the whole village felt the same way, that was a good thing. It helped the village survive. I think we're now to the point where we need people that are creative, that are individuals, that speak for themselves, but also can appreciate that same thing in other people. Humanism, again, I keep going back to this. Humanism, I think, is a lot like that. You do your thing to help out the people around you. And if it's your thing, you're more likely to pursue it. There's not any sort of resentment that you have. I know there are people in my family that are very staunch Catholics that are very resentful about Lent. For the non-Catholics or non-Christians, Lent is a period of time before Easter where you give something up. You make a sacrifice, whether it's I'm going to give up chocolate, or I'm going to give up yelling at people, or I'm going to try to be nicer to people. And they get resentful about that. And that kind of poisons the whole idea of it. It's encouraging people to be positive and to make a difference in whatever way they wish. And when you empower people that way, that's one of the other words that's big. When you empower people that way, there's a lot of good there. You get a lot of noise because you get people since there's less in common as far as the way they're looking at things, more noise, but it is a positive noise. Does that cover that, I think? Is that good?
So community and empowering one another and the creative component in the storytelling seems to be a huge draw for you toward this particular expression of paganism. So Travis, I would like you to please tell us a little bit about your background experience of paganism, and then you feel free to address any of the questions that have been brought up from your perspective.
Okay. I became a pagan. Let's see, about 6 to 7 years ago, and I had been looking for a particular religion that would fit in with my set of values, essentially, is what I was doing. I didn't realize that I could just not be religious and pick my own. And so I ended up doing a ton of research, and as a kid I was always into the Norse Viking thing, and I don't know why it had taken me so long to look it up, but I finally did, and sure enough there were these Nordic pagan groups called Asatru, and they had like these 9 noble virtues. Armin wants me to show my pagan tattoos. I got a couple. I got this guy right here. Another one's on my chest. I don't think I'll show that one. But there's a Hammer of Thor right there.
Those are cool.
That was my first tattoo, and my friend drew that for me, actually.
Those are very cool.
Thank you. I love it. Let's see. So I participated in small groups because here in Montana we don't have too large of a pagan population, especially not of the Asatru variety. I met a lot of people this way, and I actually have a very good friend that I've spoken to pretty much every day of my life since 2008 because I met him through these pagan Facebook groups, because that's how a lot of these people interact. So that's how I came to it. That's how I came to Norse paganism. I had found their virtues, so on and so forth, and I was like, oh, that says me right there. I mean, that's how I've always been, so I'm going to adopt that. I guess over time I realized that, I didn't need to have some kind of identity per se to have the values that I did. And so yeah, as far as Nurav's mention of the SS, that's actually a big problem with Nordic pagans, and Asatruar, as they call themselves. A lot, of course, just about every religious group I've ever heard of has a set of extremists, and specifically to the Nordic pagan extremists, because those do exist, they kind of shun everything except for one god, Odin, who's the head of the pantheon, and they use it as a justification for racial cleansing and for support of Hitler's ideologies because of the whole fact that he was trying to drum up German nationalism and pride through trying to revive the old Germanic faith. And so, I mean, I wanted to specifically address that. So I can take questions from there.
So are there, and anybody who has experience with paganism or just knowledge of this is welcome to answer, but are there, in your experience within your particular groups, are there quite a lot of people who believe in who believe these stories are tellings of actual things that exist, like real things? So they actually believe that there are gods, or that there is a god somewhere in an actual reality somewhere, and that there is a worship or an adoration of these particular gods, and that they get their guidance from these beings. Is that common in your experience? Or actually, Travis, since you're not muted, why don't you go ahead and just start?
It's in my experience, it wasn't very common. However, due to the online nature of a lot of the Norse pagan community, there was a lot of discussion across the board. You could have anything from, no, these are just metaphors, or these are just stories and representations of things, all the way to, yes, and you have to die in battle in order to get into Valhalla, and, you know, the gods actually exist, and sure enough, you know, the universe was created out of the fire of the south and the ice of the north coming together, you know, all that stuff. And I think that the way that I approached it was kind of like this strange middle ground, I guess. It was, you still did the ceremony, and you still kind of expected it to affect you in a way, as if there would have been literal gods. But on the other hand, you were like, well, you know, I mean, these are stories. And I think the reason that this can be so open to interpretation is that a lot of people these days, whether or not you want to call them hipsters or whatever, are into the whole, you know, going back to the roots thing. We've got environmentalism coming up. We've got some unhappiness with the major monotheistic religions, particularly of the Abrahamic variety. I mean, obviously that's not widespread, but people like going back to their roots, so to speak. So they like, well, how did the pre-Christians do it? And they want to go in that, and then they bring it forward and they try to reconstruct it as close as possible, and then they slap modern morality on it, and then they open it up to discussion. And so that's essentially the part of it that drove me to atheism anyway, because it was, I mean, it was really cool, I thought, that they could talk and change and shift, and everyone could kind of interpret what they wanted differently. But, I mean, when you're talking about morality and where it comes from and things like that, then, yeah, for sure.
So, thank you, Travis. Lishka, I'd like you to go ahead and chime in. Feel free to share with us your experience, and then maybe respond to some of these questions, specifically the one that I had asked, I believe is what you were saying that you would like to respond to. Don't forget to unmute yourself. Yeah, there.
Okay. All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay. As far as whether or not people actually believe in deities, I was in a couple covens, and one of them, the first one, kind of more along the lines of did actually believe in the deities, but didn't necessarily believe in every story that was ever told about them. You know, it was more of a moral lesson, or you know, just a good story, if nothing else. And then the second one, you know, coming from this other one and still sort of somewhat believing that, I got ridiculed for that, for that whole thinking that, oh my gosh, these gods actually might exist or might have existed. And it was pointed out to me that, oh, well, we don't actually believe that. This is just, this is energy. This is what we believe. And when you pray to a certain god, you are, like, say, the god of good fortune or whatever, you're praying for good fortune. You're trying to bring that energy into your life, whether you need money or just a good chance at a job or something to that effect.
And so what ultimately led you out of those communities?
There were a lot of factors that kind of chased me out. Part of it was the whole power structure. I found it to be very similar to church, and that there was always some dominant, just overbearing figure. In both cases of these covens, they were women. And, you know, I found it to be, you know, it's not supposed to be dogmatic, but their interpretation was it was very dogmatic. You need to believe this. You need to believe this. We could choose whatever pantheon we wanted to believe. Say somebody was interested in Norse gods, somebody was interested in the Greeks, whatever. That was fine. But we still had to, okay, you need to believe in this. We worship the earth. We do this, blah, blah, blah. And rather than teaching free thought, like learning to respect the earth on your own, it was really hammered on us. And yeah, and there was a lot of similar petty backbiting among covens and stuff like that. I would hear stories about how people from other covens would ridicule others. They didn't like the rituals. You know, I did get a bit of good advice about one coven that if say any leader told you that in order to stay in the coven you have to have sex with every member or even one of the members, run away. Okay, fine, I guess that there are some who have that requirement, whatever. But I don't know. And then another one, well, I didn't like that pantheon. Oh, this is an actual comment made to me. I still remember it from a long time ago. Oh, her goddess of choice is Morrigan. Well, Morrigan is nothing compared to Hecate. I mean, the pettiness was just astounding. It's like, come on, people, are we not supposed to actually believe in these deities as existent? I mean, come on, if it's supposed to be just energy, then what do you care who worships what? I mean, and as far as rituals go, I found them to be as completely ineffective as prayer. It's a big waste of time. I mean, especially with rituals, it's a big production. Say you have your bonfires and whatever, you dance around your bonfires. We never did the whole naked thing, fortunately, even though I guess it's probably more of a fire hazard to keep your clothes on that close to fire. But yeah, it's a lot of energy. It really gets your hopes up. You know, you're putting all this energy into something even more than just sitting there with your hands folded. Oh, I pray for this, I pray for this. And I think it's even more disappointing, you know, when, of course, you're not going to get what you want because there is no God answering prayers, period.
So, Aidan, I'd like to give you a chance to respond to some of the specifically, well, firstly, if you could please answer the question about if you have a lot of experience with a lot of people actually believing in these gods as existing or having any sort of influence or power, and then feel free to respond to any of the other comments. You need to unmute yourself first.
Okay. Am I good?
Yeah.
All right. I've had experience dealing with people, and there are people in the groups that I circle with that have a literal belief in some deity aspect. Some actual, there's this force out there that has this name and can do these things. Though that is fine if that is what your focus is. I mean, you can do your prayers, you can do all the other. There's one we talked about. People were wanting to get jobs. There were a lot of people who were out of work. So I said, so I wrote a ritual. Part of it was, yes, you get a very quiet place, get a mirror so you can see yourself, and a green candle, because green means money. The most important thing, though, is the pile of resumes and the pile of applications that you have. Go through and fill those out and do the work. Put on the robe of going to get a job, which is getting the right, dress clothes that sort of fit for that job hunt. There will be people that will be arguing the minutia of religion. A lot of cases, what it is you have these people that have fallen through the cracks of the common society where they've had no power at all, and now they're in a group where they have some small amount of power. Oh my God, Hecate, she is the best. And they'll ride that to the point where it's almost like suddenly they don't know what to do with all this, and they try to become overbearing, and it almost goes back to what the predominant religions are, where it's all about power. And don't challenge my belief. If you say yours is better, it gets in. And the word that she used was pettiness, and that is exactly what happens with the group that I work with. People that fall into that generally don't last long, and people don't interact with them, and eventually they go away. It isn't like we tell anybody to leave. It's just you show up and nobody talks to you, so you leave. That's the way it sort of works. It's kind of like shunning, but not. It's anyway. The whole thing of prayers and magic. Magic, there is, I believe it was Crowley that came up with magic is change in accordance with the will. I want this to happen. I want to get another job. Well, part of the magic of making that happen might be get a haircut, clean yourself up, go to school, learn new skills, network with people. That is magic. That affects change. That is my favorite definition of the word magic. Change in accordance with the will. There was a piece I was debating back and forth online because I really, I'm one of those people that debates with atheists online, and it's kind of amusing. But they said, well, what about, the hand of God? I said, if you want to see the hand of God, look at the end of your own arm, because that is the hand that is going to make the changes. It's going to bring what you want to have happen. And there is no force out there other than if you can get other people to work their hand of God that is on the end of their arm towards a common purpose. And that's where a lot of the magic is for me. Because there really isn't I'm sure the sociologists and psychologists would have a really good explanation as far as how a group works at that level. But if you've ever been part of a bunch of people that share a common interest or a common enthusiasm, the mechanics is sort of a black box. Everybody kind of likes this thing, and the fact that you're in with a group that likes this thing, that thing becomes better. Your team becomes more exciting. Who wants to sit at home and watch the Super Bowl by themselves? So that's really about where I'm at. I don't know if there's anything else that you need.
Yeah, no, that's great, Aidan. Thank you. Okay. I'd like to have Sarisha had a question that she didn't get a chance to ask to the group a little ways back. So I'm going to have Sarisha ask her question, and I believe Travis is probably the best person to start answering first. So go ahead, Sarisha.
Yeah, thanks, Makisha. So I've recently read about this Asatru movement. I'm not sure if I pronounced it right, in northern Iceland, where they're building temples in some neo-pagan religion is building temples in the capital city, and so. In what way is it different from any other religions? Because so far we have only heard from speakers who have said there are a bunch of rituals, there are a bunch of practices, they're pretty liberal as far as beliefs are concerned, though I think Lishka was telling us about how they force upon their ideas on and their beliefs on certain followers and to gather following. But what is this whole business about building shrines or temples just like in any other religion? So I think Travis has got the answer.
Yeah, back in the 70s, the Asatru movement was beginning. It was in its infancy. And they fought for a while to get it recognized as a religion, and back then Iceland's national religion was just Christianity. and they eventually won out. And for a long time now, Iceland, if I'm correct with my history here, has had Asatru, which is Nordic paganism. It's Icelandic for true to the gods. And they built, well, they got it recognized. And so they built up, and it's kind of been a small worldwide phenomenon where people here and there get into it. Well, recently they've decided that it is, I guess it was time to bring that back to Iceland in a more tangible way instead of just having it on a piece of paper. So they have been petitioning for quite some time, and they have finally gained approval after a lot of Christian opposition to build a temple in Reykjavik specifically for worship of the Norse gods. So that's kind of what's going on over there right now. And I think where that comes from, if this maybe helps, is that Iceland was colonized primarily by exiled Norwegians, and they kind of Christianized a little bit later than the rest of Scandinavia, and a lot I've read and heard and kind of noticed that there's a little bit of resentment towards Christianity for I don't know, taking away their belief system, and a lot of people are very serious about getting that back to a degree. So I think that's why that happened.
Okay, and thank you, Travis. That was interesting. It sounds like there's, just like anything, there's going to be fringe groups or extreme groups or different people or whatever, and especially when there's something that doesn't have a real strong dogma, you can kind of go any direction. We can go over a little bit if we need to. Everybody's sharing a lot of really good information. Aidan, did you have anything you wanted to share, or Lishka, or anybody else actually who has any knowledge about the stuff going on in Iceland? Aidan, did you have something about that? Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Okay. The temple idea, what a temple is, it is a structure that is built to create a venue for a shared interest. It is very similar to a stadium. As far as, if you've seen some of these larger, massive churches, it's a similar kind of thing. It is a place of gathering built as a venue that promotes a particular event. And for some people, ritual, being part of that, is very similar to being in a football game. One of the most spiritual, one of the most impactful events that I was ever at was at a Tom Chapin concert. We were sitting right in the front row, and there was a song called "Remember When the Music," and it was something that it took on a life of its own, because he and his brother, they both had bands, and they were out there performing it, and these guys came from the back, and one guy still had a Coke in his hand, to be involved in this, because it kept getting bigger, and the audience was singing along with it. And it was an amazing, amazing moment, unplanned. I talked with one of the guys in his group afterwards. He said that wasn't supposed to happen that way. Those are the kind of things that you create. You create those moments. You create that happening. Or actually, you don't create the happening. You create a place where it can happen, and you gather the people together. And every now and then you have one of those moments. This had nothing to do with any faith. This had nothing to do with any deity, any spiritual, anything. But it was the most impactful experience, one of the most impactful experiences I've had in my life. Those moments that you wrote in the Makisha, the moments that you talked about in that meme that I made with your face and all that, or half your face. It was one of those moments. It was one of those moments. And that is what a lot of these are about, creating that temple. Giving that moment where you are just, you feel that connection to something. And for different people, that something is something different. For me, it's a connection with everybody else that is there, human. Some people say it's God. Maybe it's both. Maybe that is God. All of us together. Who knows?
So the question has been raised how that is different from other religions. I mean, it seems kind of obvious how it's different from Christianity or the monotheistic faiths, because, you know, Christianity, you have the triune God. Islam, you have God and the Prophet. And so, but I'm wondering how a pagan who is also an atheist would explain the difference. If people say, well, how can you be opposed to, or maybe not like, or whatever, Christianity, but paganism is okay? Like, how would you articulate, how is that different for you?
For me, the simple difference is this. Try going to any Christian church, and say that I don't believe in your God. I don't believe God is a thing. I don't believe God is a separate entity. See how you do. In the bunch that we have, that's okay, because it's really paganism. At least, again, there's a wide variety of views on it, but the people that I've collected, or I've been collected by other people, is that it's about the people. It is about the group. It is about the community. And whatever labels you put on it is fine, and it is a distant second. So that, I think, is the big thing, that you don't have to share that. You don't have to share the exact belief, because really that isn't the focus of it. The focus of it is growing as a human, helping other people do their thing while they help you do your thing, while everybody. It sounds like a real hippie kind of view to it, but one of the phrases that is a wonderful one that I use in a lot of the storytelling bits that I do is Ubuntu, and Ubuntu is a concept of community from some of the, I have not gone deep into this, but some of the, from the African continent. And it is simply this: I am because we are. And I think all of us can say that. I am the person I am because of the people that are in my life. Some of the interests that I have and some of the skills that I've got, I mean, Makisha is a good example. I keep using her. But a lot of what I've got as far as using the social networking stuff, which is very modern, as a tool to deal with old concepts, is something that I have really directly because of her. I am because we are, because she is in my circle of friends and she is someone that I know. My life is a better place, and I recognize it and I revere that. There is no God that is a part of that. But there is something that in her words that are those transcendent moments where a change takes place, where you're aware of your position in the process and you're aware of how that process is affecting you. So that is the big difference. There is not a need to profess faith in anything other than your belief in some other person, your belief in their ability, your belief in their potential, and trust in their potential or trust in their belief in you. And there's an amazing, amazing thing that happens with that. If you are going to say that, try walking into a mosque, especially one of the more that's radical, and say, you know what, I think Allah is just a metaphor. You know, see if you keep your head.
Yeah, so I mean, and Travis mentioned this in our little side chat as well, that there's a lot more of, as always, we're speaking in very broad strokes here, but that there's room for revisionism. There's room for much greater personal interpretation, because again, there's no sort of hardline dogmas that are being presented. I'm interested in, and maybe we will probably have to take this and pull it out for another day, but I am interested in the intersection or the interplay between, and even how paganism is perceived from the perspective of people who live in India who are have that exposure to Hinduism, because in a way it sounds like there is a lot of, I don't know, not necessarily similarities or parallels, but just that it would be perceived differently from the perspective of somebody who has a lot of experience with Hinduism. So I think that would be really interesting maybe to talk about sometime as well, because I kind of see a little bit of a different perspective in the questions that are being asked from our friends who have that experience. Armin, do you have Actually, you know what? Did anybody else, Travis or Lishka, want to respond to that as far as the differences of paganism, or did you have any other feedback before we move on to a different question?
I think for me it's okay to move on to another question.
Okay, great. So Armin, go ahead. I know you said you had a bunch of questions, so toss one our way.
All right, I'll try to make this quick because it's a long question. So it seems to me that what pagans doing, based on what you guys said, is they're not really getting their morality out of these stories. They have their own values and moral standards, and they're just looking for these moral standards in the stories, basically a way to confirm, to basically give strength and some meaning and and have some community around the values that they already have. It's not like, and if that's what they're doing, this seems to me a lot like what Christian and Islamic apologetics does. These are moderate and liberal Muslims and Christians that have some moral values that is not because of their religion, it's because of the modern world and you know and how our moral values have evolved, and now they are trying to look for clues in scripture in a way to show, like, oh, look, the Quran or the Bible was always talking about this. The difference seems to be that these Muslims and Christian moderates are, by doing that, are causing a lot of harm because they're giving legitimacy to a scripture that some other people use as a weapon. But for pagans, maybe this is not as big of that big of a danger because they're not giving legitimacy to a system that has any political influence. But my question is, like, what if it was different? What if Christianity and Islam were dead religions now, and Valhalla and these other pagan religions were dominant today? I think these religions could have also been used in the same way that Christianity and Islam is being used today, especially, for example, the belief that if you want to go to Valhalla, the only way to do that is to die in a battle. That seems like a very great way of raising armies if people had that belief system. So I'm thinking, like, and maybe if Christianity and Islam were dead religions, people would look at those as paganism today, and you guys would be basically saying the same thing that you're saying about paganism, the same way you would be talking about Islam if it was a way around. What do you guys think?
So what is that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear a question. Was there a specific question, or were you just like, what do you think of that kind of thing?
My question is that I think the only reason why, do you think the only reason why you consider these pagan religions more, more acceptable is because they're dead religions, and as opposition to Abrahamic religion? I think if it was the other way around, maybe we would see Islam and Christianity as valuable religions and use them as oppositions to these religions that have survived today. That was
I think your
religion. Go ahead. You go.
I think you're entirely right, actually, because I think part of the appeal of these older pagan faiths is that, I mean, we don't have everything. We don't have all of the pieces of it. And that's why even when people are like, oh, I'm a traditional pagan of this variety, they can only be so traditional. Because, I mean, in the case of the Nordic paganism, we have sagas and the Eddas, like the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda, which essentially are the myths. But we don't know how they actually worshipped. We don't know how they, I mean, there's hints here and there, but we don't know a lot about how that culture actually ran. So when people take it and they reconstruct it, they are applying modern-day morality. So sure, if the tables were turned and the whole world had been colonized by Vikings and everyone believed in Odin, Thor, Freya and all that, we probably would be saying that. Because there might be pieces of Christianity missing, and then of course Christianity wouldn't have the history that it does now, and people would look at it and be like, oh, well, this is what he was teaching, but, you know, we only have half of the Bible, or we only have, you know, parts of the New Testament and things like that, so we have to reconstruct it, and then it becomes open to, assuming morality stays the same in this alternate timeline, morality right now, it would be, well, you know, we can interpret this in different ways. It's just that Christianity and Islam and the other monotheistic faiths have the history of being spread, often by sword point, gun point, whatever, and they also have the misfortune of being told, or you know, having the label that they were immutable, that you could not change them from a very early period. If you were to come up with that kind of stuff today, you would be like, well, that's your interpretation, man. You know, that's the pagan, that's the way that we treat paganism now, today, or that pagans approach it generally. But yeah, if the tables were turned, I think you're entirely right, Armin. I mean, that's just the case. Go ahead.
I think that it's less about, I don't think religion is the problem of whatever type. I think what it was is religion was used to consolidate power based on authority. And that is where your problems come in. And I think I'm agreeing with what you were saying before, where if it was reversed, if the roles were reversed, you would have the same problems. It isn't as much the religion. It's the fact that religion was used to consolidate power. It was used as a way to bring people into one group so they were more easy to control. That is what I believe the issue is. The idea, though, and this is something that even in modern day works with pagan groups do not scale very well. The fact that you have so many, that it does encourage individuality and does encourage different beliefs, once you get more than 30 or 40 people in a group, maybe 50 people in a group, there's the ideas, the range of ideas and beliefs is so broad that it doesn't lend itself to being a really, really cohesive group. With your Abrahamic faiths and the other faiths, everybody is in lockstep with their belief. You can put a huge number of people together that way. And the fact that it is also very much our way is the only way also draws a certain type of person. And this is something else that helps hold the group together and turns it into a very dominating force in politics or in any group like that. Using religion as that kind of tool, as the glue to hold something together. It said pagan groups don't scale all that well for any length of time. It's tough. It's tough. It's like herding cats. That's one of the things that I've heard it compared to. It just doesn't work. You know, we might have 20 or 30 people at a gathering for our rituals or for our events, and everybody has a good time. But the next time everybody's together, it could be a completely different group, different mix of people. So I think that it was more the power part that played that is the problematic part of religion. You know, believe or die, and that is there are still faiths out there that are doing it. You know, they're burning some guy in a cage. This is something that they see as being part of their faith. They're insane.
Any other feedback to Armin's question? We're probably should wrap it up here for our live part and the section that we're recording. We can continue beyond that, but is there any last words or final questions that anybody has?
If I may,
Lishka, yes, go ahead.
I agree that you know, it's so easy to put a positive spin on paganism at this point, because the victims, all the victims of the old pagan style, they've been dead for centuries. So I think because we're so far removed from that, it's easy to put a happier, more positive spin on it. And you know, where we have a different world now. You know, we have a world that we're destroying with our technology. Well, they didn't really have those problems centuries ago. And so I think it's easier to put, you know, a more nature-loving spin on it, where centuries ago they probably didn't care as much because they didn't need to. So I really think that there is a difference between old paganism and then the neo-paganism, which is kind of, you know, the neo has kind of gone away. but I don't think it's entirely accurate to drop it.
One of the tenets that we've got is that which does not grow and change withers and dies. Holding on to an idea because, well, we've always done it that way is really counterproductive on so many different levels. The whole revisionist aspect, yes, this doesn't work anymore. This doesn't apply anymore. Women are not property, those kind of things. That, our society seems to move forward if we allow everybody to be everything that they can be. So the old ideas go away. The cultural taboos, especially a lot of it that was designed to keep women down. You read through the Old Testament sometimes. It's kind of really horrific as far as what was used and the beliefs that were had. But now we know that those are not relevant, so those are part of history. You get rid of what doesn't work and what doesn't move people forward. You adapt and adopt what does move people forward and what does advance us as a species. Part of the challenge is recognizing those different aspects and then prioritizing them. Sure, we can make everybody rich, but we're going to be living in we're going to have poison water and poison air. That's kind of the challenges right now.
And on that note, I'm going to let our pagan priest in residence have the last word, and we can take this conversation offline. Of course, we can, if everybody wants to argue for making these live chats go longer whenever we want, that we can have that conversation as well. But for today, we're going to stick to our nearly hour and a quarter, and thank everybody for coming and joining us today. Thank you, Aidan, so much, and Travis and Lishka, thank you for your personal experiences and input. That was really a great chat, and I appreciate everyone here for joining us and for your questions. We will see everybody back next week, same bat time, same bat place. I'm Makisha. Have a great week.